When I asked Ethan why he had gone ahead and made an authorized user card for his parents-in-law, he laughed and said, "Because we're family. Of course it makes sense to have an authorized user card. Got a problem with that? If you knew who married lonely Sophia, you wouldn't say such a thing, right?" His tone was much more arrogant than I'd ever heard before, and I found myself speechless. Was Ethan always like this? "If you're grateful, then devote more to my family. Then I'll consider you as part of the family. Until then, it's like we're only married on paper." I had never heard of a marriage being considered a trial before. Seeing me silent, Ethan pressed on. "That means you're not yet a full member of the family. If you don't like it, you're free to leave any time. For now, our family is just the five of us. No place for a useless parasite." Understood. After I canceled all the credit cards and moved out. My name is Sophia, 27 years old, a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer at a major advertising agency, but I went independent when I got married 2 years ago, and now I work from home. My parents died in an accident when I was young. I was raised by my grandparents, but I moved back to an apartment close to the city where I lived with my parents when I went to college, and have lived there ever since. I met my husband Ethan at an Italian restaurant where he worked. It was a place with a good atmosphere, reasonable prices, and great food, so my colleagues and I would occasionally stop by. That's when Ethan, a handsome waiter, became a topic of conversation among us. Ethan was indeed attractive. The manager once joked that a good percentage of the regulars came just to see Ethan, and I understood why. He was that charming. I won't deny that I became one of Ethan's fans, thinking he was cool. He was that noticeable. However, for some reason, we quickly became close, and before we knew it, we were being called a couple, and to my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much about that time. It was like I got drunk, and when I sobered up, the man I now call my husband was beside me. It felt something like that. But even so, I loved Ethan at the time and was happy. When we got married, I quit my job at the company where I had been working as a designer and started working independently. I continued doing the same kind of work, but now on a freelance basis. Ethan worked at the Italian restaurant. His hours varied, sometimes late into the night. It became a bit difficult to keep working as before, and I had been wanting to go independent for a while, so I took the plunge. "I think it's a good idea. It'll be easier on you, Sophia, and it's good to continue doing the work you love." Ethan agreed, and that's how our married life started. Both of us not being fans of flashy events, we skipped a wedding ceremony and had a family meeting instead. Ethan would go to work, and I'd work from home and take care of the house. Our schedules were irregular, but we kept in touch frequently, waiting for each other to come home to eat together. It was a fun and happy daily life. I thought marriage was wonderful. But about a year into our marriage, everything collapsed when Ethan suddenly said, "My family wants to come over. Is that okay?" Of course, I said it was okay. I had only met Ethan's family briefly at the family meeting, so I thought it would be nice to get to know them better. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always admired Ethan's family. But when Ethan's 4 family members arrived, I was at a loss for words. "Hey, where's my room?" Sister-in-law Zoe asked as soon as she entered the house. Zoe was 32, 5 years older than me and Ethan, and from what I heard, she worked in a local supermarket. I was surprised by her rude manner, so different from the polite greetings at our first meeting. 18-year-old sister-in-law Harper was there too, but in contrast, she didn't speak a word and just stood there quietly. Now that I think about it, Harper hardly spoke during the family meeting, just introduced herself. Rushed by Zoe, I showed Zoe and Harper to the guest room, and the parents-in-law to what used to be my parents' room. After the parents-in-law settled into their rooms, Zoe declared, "Now that we'll be living together, make sure you take good care of us as family." I didn't understand what she meant, but when I looked at Ethan for help, He was twisting his face in a way I'd never seen before, laughing. Turns out, the in-laws had given up their house and moved into my apartment. Sorry about this. Apparently, my parents' home had to be vacated suddenly, and they had nowhere to go. I wish he had told me this earlier. I thought it was just for a day or two. This is really inconvenient. I said to Ethan as kindly as possible, and he apologized. Anyway, just until we find a new place, please. I couldn't say no after that. It's not like I could turn away people in need, especially when it's the family of someone important to me, without even having a place for them to go. I agreed to live together, albeit reluctantly, after making them promise to look for a place to live as soon as possible. But I would come to regret that decision. Ethan's family showed no restraint. All 4 of them did nothing from the day they moved in, leaving everything to me. There was no sign of them looking for a new place, nor any indication of them working. I asked about their jobs and was surprised again. Oh, I quit that supermarket job. Zoe had said she was working, but it turns out it was only part-time. I had assumed she was a full-time employee because of her age, but she hadn't worked properly since graduating from school. The parents-in-law were also part-timers and had quit their jobs when they moved here. Of course, Harper was unemployed. She had said she was a student preparing for exams, but that was a lie. Why work when we're now part of a wealthy family? It doesn't make sense to commute from here to my old job. And why work when you're rich? Wealthy family? Who could that be? When I asked, I got another surprising answer. It's you, Sophia. You got a lot from your parents' insurance, right? And you don't have a mortgage on this apartment. You can live off that. Zoe said this with a laugh. When I protested to Ethan upon his return, he raised his voice in displeasure more than I'd ever seen. Everyone's tired from having to suddenly leave their home. Let them rest for a while. Or do you want to coldly kick out my family? Stunned, I froze, and then Ethan softened his tone. Sorry for yelling. I'm just as troubled, and I'm tired from work today. Understand? Just bear with it a little longer. Ethan was skilled at handling women. Looking back, he had always managed to control women by alternating between harshness and kindness. But at that time, I didn't understand, and reluctantly agreed to endure it a little longer. And the tyranny of the family in-laws only got worse. They treated me like a housekeeper when at home, and demanded money when they wanted to go out. How can we look for jobs without even $1? It's okay, but if we don't find jobs, we'll just have to live here forever. I reluctantly gave them a little money, but they would return having spent it all, likely never having looked for jobs. But if I mentioned that without proof, I would be accused of lying and harassed for hours by the entire family in-laws. Talking to Ethan when he returned did not solve anything. Everyone's frustrated because they can't find jobs. Sorry, just bear with it a little longer. I'll talk to them. That's how he would pacify the situation. After repeating this several times, it felt pointless to even mention it, but gradually they asked for money less often, so it seemed to resolve itself. Of course, the money I gave was never returned. After about 3 months of this, I realized something terrible. Why is the amount charged on my credit card so high? Could it be unauthorized use of my credit card? Upon checking the statement, all the charges were made with an authorized user card. The purchases ranged from food, drinks, books, and games to expensive brand bags and clothes. There were numbers assigned from 1 to 5, meaning 5 authorized user cards had been issued. Currently, the credit card is in my name, with Ethan using one as an authorized user. Sophia, you seem better at handling this stuff, and it'd be easier to manage payments if we consolidate. You mind taking care of it? I agreed to manage it, but it seems that additional authorized user cards were issued without my knowledge. The reason the family-in-laws stopped asking for money was because they could now use the credit card for payments and cash advances. Upon learning this, I was understandably upset. When I asked why he had issued authorized user cards to the family-in-laws without asking, Ethan laughed and said, "If I say we're out of money, you complain. So what choice do I have? Besides, you know who married you, right? Can you really say such things to the important family of your benefactor?" I was shocked by his unprecedented arrogance. Was Ethan always like this? "If you're grateful, then devote more to my family. Then I'll consider you as part of the family. Until then, it's like we're only married on paper." I had never heard of a marriage being considered a trial before. Seeing me silent, Ethan pressed on. "That means you're not yet a full member of the family. If you don't like it, you're free to leave any time. For now, our family is just the 5 of us. No place for a useless parasite." That was the moment I truly saw Ethan's true colors. I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I considered divorcing Ethan. Or rather, I began to wonder why I had married Ethan in the first place. At first, I just thought he was handsome. Like the other girls, I was just excited about his looks, without any particular intentions. Then one day, when I stepped away to the bathroom, Ethan approached me. "Sophia, you seem a bit different from others, don't you?" I don't know, mystical. Sorry, it's odd to say this to a customer." Gradually, I started to pay more attention to Ethan. Maybe that was all part of his strategy to make me like him. Looking back, it feels likely. Indeed, when Ethan was chatting with us at our table, a colleague jokingly said I was a rich girl living alone in a large apartment downtown. It was right after that Ethan started approaching me. Probably he was eyeing my wealth and this apartment. Ethan was never really my type. To put it nicely, he's trendy. To put it not so nicely, he seems a bit like a playboy. I preferred someone mature with whom I could have a deep, quiet conversation, yet somehow I found myself liking Ethan. It was always a mystery to me. Ethan is what you'd call handsome. He must have been confident in his ability to charm a woman, especially one like me, not used to men and just starting my career. I fell for his strategy and ended up marrying him. Thinking about it made me want to smash everything in the house out of frustration and shame. But I wasn't foolish enough to actually do it. I decided to get revenge, or rather, payback. For that, I'd have to endure this life a little longer. Just as Ethan manipulated me, I manipulate the entire family-in-laws. The apartment I live in was bought by my dad shortly after I was born with a mortgage. It wasn't very expensive at the time, but after a large shopping mall was built nearby, the area developed rapidly, and now it's considered a luxury apartment. My parents, who wanted many children, bought a spacious room so the family could grow. Therefore, even if the family-in-laws moved out, I could manage to live on. But despite the apartment's decent size, having the family-in-laws around was a nuisance, especially since I work from home. Still, I endured it all for the sake of revenge. As Zoe said, there's no mortgage payment for this apartment. My parents passed away. A car accident when I was 3. They collided with a speeding car on the highway. That day, I was supposed to go with them, but I fell ill with the flu, running a high fever. So my grandparents came over to take care of me at the apartment. And then I was left alone. The insurance company took care of the mortgage payments, so the only house expenses I have are the maintenance fees and property taxes. Ethan suggested he contribute just a bit more than those amounts to the household. "There's no mortgage, so if I put in that much, we should be okay with your income, right? We can each use our earnings for personal expenses. Is that okay?" When Ethan said that, I agreed, thinking it might be reasonable. Before, I managed all the payments by myself, so his contribution seemed to ease the burden somewhat. Looking back, I was foolish, blinded by love for Ethan, complying with everything he said. Ethan probably sees himself as the head of the household, believing he's supporting me. That's why he can call me a parasite without batting an eye. But the reality is different. I pay for most of the utilities, groceries, social expenses, entertainment, and now There are 5 more true parasites added to the list. The amount he contributes is nowhere near enough. I wanted to get rid of the parasites at the earliest, but pretended not to notice. Despite the family-in-laws shopping recklessly, I clenched my teeth and endured, reminding myself that I would have the last laugh through these tough times. Finally, the day to take action arrived, 3 months after deciding to divorce. I'm tired. You need to choose between me and the family-in-laws. That day, I presented Ethan with this ultimatum. Ethan was shocked, but I continued without care. The family-in-laws don't do any housework and just dump tasks on me. As you know, Ethan, I'm working even when I'm at home. I'm not just playing around. Yet I'm treated as unemployed, told to appreciate that you are supporting me. I've reached my limit. Tears flowed as I appealed to Ethan. Ethan looked at me with a sleazy grin and said, "Then you should leave. I told you before, you aren't really part of the family. You never became part of the family." Pretending to be surprised, I looked at Ethan. "Are you shocked? If you say you can't live with my family, then you have to leave. Oh, and just so you know, I'll take this apartment as compensation in the divorce, and half of your savings as part of the property settlement." Ah, so that was his aim all along. That's why the family-in-laws continued their harassment, trying to drive me out. Though I suspected it, hearing it explicitly still shocked me. After all, he was someone I once loved and married. But this helped me make up my mind. Understood. I decided to divorce Ethan. But this apartment is mine, and I'm not at fault here. What did you say? The cause of the divorce is you allowing the family-in-laws to live here without discussing it with me and their harassment towards me. I stated clearly to Ethan. He seemed surprised, not expecting me to outright reject his demands. That makes sense, as I've always complied with Ethan's requests since our marriage. Even thinking back irritates me, and my own past compliance. I don't want to spend another second with you all, so I'll be leaving now. But you should also prepare to leave. It's no joke. This is our home. We're not leaving. Ever heard of tenant rights? You can't just force someone out who's living here. As Ethan made a fuss, I left the house and went to my grandparents. I explained the situation and asked if I could stay until things were settled. My grandparents were shocked to hear what I had been through, and scolded me with tears in their eyes for not consulting them sooner. "Grandpa, Grandma, I'm sorry for worrying you, but it's okay now. You know, even though I might seem gentle, I'm not really like that." I forced a smile through my tears. The day after I left the apartment, Ethan contacted me promptly. "Hey, what was that about?" "What do you mean?" "The documents from the lawyer." I was impressed by how quickly the lawyer had acted. I had arranged for the divorce proceedings through a lawyer who, knowing I was leaving the house yesterday, had arranged for the documents to be delivered today. "I'm not going to pay any alimony, and I'm definitely not leaving the apartment." "Legally, Ethan, you have an obligation to pay, and you have no right to continue living in that apartment." "What are you talking about? The apartment is mine too, since we're married. If you insist, pay me half the money to buy me out." His claim made no sense. Talking this way won't resolve anything. Please communicate through the lawyer from now on. I hung up, not willing to discuss any further. Expecting another call tomorrow, but I had no desire to talk today. Sure enough, he called again the next morning. "Hey, what's the meaning of this?" The same line as yesterday. "What do you mean?" "My credit card's been canceled. What did you do?" "I canceled it. That credit card was mine, and you were just an authorized user, remember?" Yes, I had switched all contracts to another credit card and canceled the old one before leaving. Once I cancel it, of course the authorized user card would stop working. "I was making payments too." "Yes, for the apartment's maintenance fees and property taxes, and only for the first 2 months. It's not much, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you like." His indignant shout came through the phone. Indeed, Ethan had only made payments for the first 2 months. He had made various excuses and stopped paying, forgetting he had made those payments, showcasing his poor memory. But that no longer mattered to me. People I'm cutting ties with, no matter their memory capacity, no longer concern me. So you'll need to pay half of all the living expenses I've covered. I've kept a detailed household ledger, which I'll submit as evidence. Then divide the savings fairly, too. It's marital property. Sure, I understand. We'll divide it fairly. After saying that and receiving a parting shot, the call ended. Hey, what's the meaning of this? A few days later, he called again with the same line. His lack of vocabulary was evident as his memory issues. What do you mean? The division of marital assets. Why is there nothing? Sophia, you have a lot from your parents' insurance, right? Ah, so he thought that. I explained politely that my savings before marriage do not count as marital assets, and that there are no savings after marriage, so naturally the amount is zero. Don't lie. If you think it's a lie, why don't you consult someone? Anyway, from now on, please communicate everything through the lawyer. We won't be talking directly anymore. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked Ethan's number. 2 months after I left, Ethan and the family-in-laws finally moved out of the apartment. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they could no longer afford to live there. Firstly, Ethan's income alone wasn't enough to support a family of 5. That was to be expected. They had freely used my credit card for shopping sprees, and were not about to start economizing now. I had intentionally allowed them free rein with the credit card, knowing it would come to this with the family-in-laws. They began to demand shopping from Ethan, and, when he refused, resorted to stealing money from his wallet. Even when Ethan got angry, they blamed him for my departure and ganged up on him. Then, the electricity, gas, and water were all cut off. Of course, I had arranged for their termination, citing no immediate plans to return. Ethan tried to have the services restored over the phone, but the property was in my name, and they wouldn't listen to someone unrelated to the owner. The family-in-laws couldn't stand the intense heat and left the apartment. I don't know where they went, nor do I care to know. Ethan tried to stay until the end, but eventually gave up due to the lack of electricity and inability to shower. The divorce negotiations proceeded quicker than expected. Not because Ethan had a change of heart and agreed to the terms, but because he made a significant mistake. He cheated before our divorce was finalized. Or perhaps he felt confident enough to start such behavior early on. He boasted about owning a luxury apartment in a prime city location to lure young women. Despite the family-in-law's presence, he had been engaging in such actions even while they lived with him, and they seemed indifferent to it. Given his good looks, I had suspected such activities. Before leaving, I had installed cameras in several places around the house which captured all the evidence needed. Ethan underestimated me, to say the least. I demanded a significant sum as compensation in the divorce for his bringing the family-in-laws into our home without my permission, making me pay for the authorized user card they used, driving me out, and cheating. Ethan paled at the amount and desperately sought reconciliation, but I had no intention of going back. Knowing he couldn't pay, I aimed to have him incur as much debt as possible. When I threatened to sue for fraud over the unauthorized creation of the user card, he reluctantly agreed. I hope he manages to pay off his debt. The divorce is finalized, and I'm still staying with my grandparents. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I might even sell it. Although it was a precious gift from my parents, with no memories of them, and after everything that's happened, I think they would understand if I let it go. My work as an illustrator is slowly picking up. Well, I might live alone again. It's a good era to work remotely from my grandparents' home. I'll indulge in their care a little longer before taking a firm step forward. This time, I hope not to be deceived by a man's looks, and find a partner with whom I can share my life